Welcome to the legendary Lore channel. If you are watching for the first time, subscribe to see more videos that teach morals. Let's dive into the story. Watch and listen until the end. The bond between a man and his dog is often portrayed as unbreakable, a partnership built on mutual trust, loyalty, and companionship. For Matthew, this bond was almost sacred. He had always loved dogs, finding solace in their presence from an early age. As a child growing up in a small, tranquil town, he would often wander the countryside, followed by stray dogs that seemed to be drawn to his kindness. They were his confidants, protectors, and friends when loneliness crept into his life. Years later, when Matthew became a father and moved with his wife, Clara, and their 3 children to a sprawling rural home, his love for dogs only deepened. The pit bull held a special place in his heart among all the breeds he admired. He was captivated by their strength, intelligence, and undeniable loyalty. When he first brought home a pit bull puppy he named Bruno, it felt like the start of a perfect companionship. Bruno grew quickly, and with each passing month, his muscular frame and piercing eyes became more striking. Matthew took pride in the dog's obedience and trained him with care. Bruno was disciplined and protective and seemed to share an unspoken connection with Matthew. However, Bruno's temperament was peculiar. He was fiercely loyal to Matthew but showed little interest in forming bonds with the rest of the family. Clara noticed this early on and voiced her concerns. "He's a good dog, Matt, but the kids are afraid of him. Maybe he's not the right fit for a family like ours," Clara said one evening as they sat on the porch, watching Bruno patrol the yard. Matthew dismissed her worries with a wave of his hand. "He's harmless, Clara. He's just protective. Once the kids spend more time with him, they'll see he's nothing to fear." Despite Matthew's reassurances, Clara couldn't shake her unease. Bruno's behavior around the children was unpredictable. He would growl softly if they approached him too quickly or try to touch his food. His eyes would narrow and his body would stiffen, sending shivers down Clara's spine. The children, 8-year-old Emma, 6-year-old Liam, and 3-year-old Sophie, learned to keep their distance, observing Bruno from afar. For Matthew, however, Bruno was a source of pride and joy. The dog accompanied him everywhere, to the fields where he worked, on hikes through the woods, and even during quiet moments of reflection. Bruno was more than a pet. He was a symbol of strength and companionship. Matthew's attachment to the dog grew to the point where he couldn't imagine life without him. But as Bruno matured, his aloofness toward the family turned into something darker. The once quiet growls became louder and more frequent. Clara's warnings grew more urgent, but Matthew remained steadfast in his belief that Bruno was misunderstood. "He's just doing his job," Matthew argued. "He's protecting us, Clara. That's what he's supposed to do." Clara felt a growing sense of isolation. Her husband's unwavering loyalty to the dog overshadowed her concerns, and she began to feel as though Bruno was not just a dog, but a shadow that loomed over their family. Friends and neighbors noticed Bruno's menacing demeanor and began avoiding the family's home. Invitations to barbecues and gatherings dwindled, and the laughter that once filled their yard became a distant memory. As the years went by, the tension within the household grew. Bruno's presence was a constant source of unease for Clara and the children. Emma and Liam no longer played in the yard, and Sophie, who was now 5, would clutch her mother's hand tightly whenever Bruno was near. Clara often found herself wondering how long they could continue living this way. One evening, while Matthew was out running errands, Clara decided to confront Bruno. The dog had taken to lying in the middle of the living room, his eyes fixed on anyone who dared to move. Clara approached him cautiously, her heart pounding. "Bruno, you need to stop this," she whispered, her voice trembling. "This is our home, not yours." Bruno's ears twitched, and his eyes met hers. For a brief moment, Clara thought she saw a flicker of understanding in his gaze, but it was quickly replaced by a cold, unyielding stare. She backed away, her hands trembling. When Matthew returned that night, Clara tried once more to express her fears. "Matt, we need to do something about Bruno. He's scaring the kids. He's scaring me. This can't go on." Matthew's face hardened. "Bruno is part of this family, Clara. He's not going anywhere." Clara's shoulders sagged in defeat. She knew Matthew's love for the dog ran deep, but she couldn't shake the feeling that their family was on the brink of a disaster. The fateful day arrived without warning. It began like any other, with Matthew leaving early to tend to the fields and Clara preparing breakfast for the children. Bruno lay in his usual spot by the window, his eyes following Clara's every move. As the morning unfolded, Emma and Liam played a quiet game in the living room while Sophie wandered into the kitchen to help her mother. The sun shone brightly, casting a warm glow over the house, but an undercurrent of tension lingered. What happened next would forever change the family's lives. It began with a sudden, blood-curdling scream that echoed through the house. Clara dropped the pan she was holding and ran toward the sound, her heart racing. She found Emma and Liam huddled together, their faces pale and tear-streaked. "What happened? Where's Sophie?" Clara's voice was frantic. Emma pointed toward the yard, her hand shaking. Clara's eyes widened as she rushed outside, calling Sophie's name. What she saw made her knees buckle. Bruno stood in the middle of the yard, his powerful jaws clenched around something small and motionless. It was Sophie's favorite toy, a stuffed rabbit she carried everywhere. But Sophie was nowhere to be seen. The minutes that followed were a blur. Clara screamed for Matthew, her voice breaking with desperation. The children cried uncontrollably as neighbors gathered at the edge of the yard, drawn by the commotion. Matthew arrived moments later, his face a mask of confusion and dread. "Where is she?" he demanded, his voice trembling. Clara pointed to Bruno, who now stood by the edge of the woods, his body tense and his eyes gleaming with an unsettling intensity. Matthew's heart sank as he approached the dog, calling Sophie's name. But it was too late. The truth of what had happened became painfully clear, shattering the fragile world they had built. The days that followed were filled with grief and anguish. Friends and family distanced themselves, unwilling to face the tragedy that had unfolded. Clara's once vivid protests turned into a haunting silence, and Matthew was consumed by guilt. He had loved Bruno deeply, but that love had come at an unimaginable cost. Clara made a decision she knew was necessary, but could hardly bear. Late one night, while Matthew sat alone in the living room, she prepared a dish laced with poison. As Bruno ate, oblivious to what was happening, Clara's tears fell freely. When Matthew discovered what she had done, he collapsed to his knees, his cries echoing through the empty house. The weight of their loss was too much to bear, and the family's once bright future now lay in ruins. Though Bruno's chapter had ended, the scars he left behind would never fade. The story of Matthew and his dog became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the fine line between loyalty and blindness, love and tragedy. It was a tale that would be told and retold, its haunting message lingering in the hearts of all who heard it.